So now we're on probability lesson 23A from the probability activities packet for chapter 3. And in this one we're going to look at some basic percents that should be pretty easy to do mentally. We shouldn't need a calculator to find these percents. 0%, which is nothing, 50%, which is half, and 100%, which is the whole thing. So we're either looking at nothing, half, or all of the numbers. So first one's pretty simple. 100% of 58, the whole thing is just 58. 50% of 58, half of it, 50% is half. So if we think of half of 58, then we have 29. So you can just mentally do that. So all I did was just think of what's half of 50 is 25, and half of 8 is 4, and 25 and 4 is 29. So mentally just work through that. And then 50% of 62, so again half of 62, half of 60 is 30, half of 2 is 1, so 31. 0% of 78 is just 0. 100% of 687, the whole thing, 687. 50% of 640, so half of this, half of 600 is 300, half of 40 is 20. And then the last one, it's a very simple lesson, 0% of 500 is, of course, none of it. So that's section 23A. Now we're going to continue right on into section 24A, kind of the same thing, but now we're going to add another one that should be pretty easy to do mentally. Again, we have the 0% and the 50% and the 100%, so half, whole, and nothing, but then we also add 10%, which is 1/10, or you can take the number and divide it by 10 to find that one. So let's again just do a few more simple problems here. 50% of 46, or half of it, 50% is half, and so half of 40 is 20, half of 6 is 3. Done with that one. 0% of 46, of course, is 0. 100% of 46 is the whole thing. And now we get to one that's a little bit more difficult, but if we think about 10%, 10% is 10 out of 100, or it's 1 out of 10, or you can think of it as whatever the number is divided by 10. So take 560, divide it by 10 is just 56. Really, you're moving a decimal point over one place to the left when you divide by 10. So 500 is 56. 10% of 48, so again we're taking 1/10 of this, or dividing it by 10. So 48 divided by 10 is going to move the decimal point over one place to the left. And really mentally I'm just going one place to the left. When you divide by 10, it makes it smaller, and we get 4.8. And I would do exactly the same thing with this one. When you're finding 10%, you're just dividing by 10, and that moves it. Since our number system is decimal or based on tenths, all we have to do is move the decimal point one place to the left to 4.68, and now I have 10% of that number, or 1/10 of it. Let's do that mentally. And then back to another 50%, or half of 68. Half of 60 is 30, half of 8 is 4, so we have 34. And then another pretty easy one, 100%, is the whole thing, 467. And that's just finding percents of numbers. Now we're going to continue on one more section here, fairly simple, because now we're going to use the percent line idea to do the same thing. So if we take a percent line, and our percent lines for all these different percent, 0, 10, 25, 50, and 100%. So again, if we start with the number 60, and we know that 50% of it is half of it, 25% of it is half of the half, 10% of it is 1/10, or this number divided by 10, so 60 divided by 10, and of course 0% is none of it. So there's our 0%, 10%, 25%, and 50% of 60. for that first one. And then continuing on, another percent line. This time they give us the 50% amount, which is 15, so this is the half. So the whole would be twice as much. And then half of that, half of 15, which is your 25%, if you have, where 25% is half of 50%. And then the 10%, we have to go back to the 100%, and remember it's 1/10 of this, or this divided by 10, so 30 divided by 10 is 3, so there's your 10%, and of course 0% is the 0. Alright, one more. So in this one they give us the 10%. Now the 0, would just go ahead and fill that in as 0, that's easy. 10%. Then to get 10%, we had to take whatever the full amount was and divide it by 10. So to go the other way, we're going to multiply it by 10. So if I take 16 times 10, then I have 160. I just got to put a 0 on it. Really, I'm just moving the decimal point one place to the right and filling in that space with a 0. So now I have the 10% and the 100%. So now the 50% is easy because I have 160. I have half of that, which is 80. And then the 25%, which is half of the 80, or 40. So again, the 25% is half of the 50%, the 50% is half of the 100%, the 100% is 10 times the 10%, or the other way around to think of it is the 10% is 1/10 of the 100%. So there are my probabilities, and using percent lines to find different probabilities. Sometimes a handy way to just find percents of different numbers. And that's 25A.